1st of February 2026. Coming up on today's Global Intelligence Agency Operations Report. The United Nations declares it is facing imminent financial collapse without urgent action, and they are urging its member nations to pay their membership dues in a timely manner. While behind the scenes, many countries are scraping the bottom of the barrel to just make payroll of federal employees. Speaking of scraping the bottom of the barrel, the U.S. has entered its second shutdown in less than 3 months. For the last week, there has been constant offers of new handlers, contracts, and all kinds of demands coming from the deep state to this office. And an update on the destruction of the matrix, new systems we are implementing, plus a little history that may surprise you.
Have you ever started a weight loss program only to quit because you feel it isn't working? Well, it's not you, and you are not alone. There are two main causes behind your inability to lose weight over 30. 1. Insulin resistance. And 2. Your gut biome. If these two are out of balance, weight loss stalls. But what if we told you there is a natural supplement that can help? This natural compound has been fighting metabolic decline, insulin resistance, and age-related weight gain for centuries. But it has been kept a secret in favor of big profits. Natural practitioners called it the golden healer. Science calls it nature's metformin. We call it Berberine Plus. Our Berberine Plus not only contains this ancient natural compound, we also added highly absorbable forms of grapeseed extract, folate, R-alpha-lipoic acid, and more for optimal metabolic support. Over time, research shows, unlike other unnatural solutions, Berberine Plus can help repair metabolic issues, not just cover up the problem. New Earth's unique formulation supports lower fasting glucose levels and post-meal blood sugar spikes, helps improve insulin sensitivity and resistance, supports lower cholesterol levels, reduces inflammation caused by an unhealthy gut biome, improves metabolism while targeting visceral belly fat, the dangerous fat that accumulates around your organs. Order now and start your journey toward a healthy weight in 20 to 26 with New Earth's Berberine Plus. Naturally, your body will thank you.
Well, it's the 1st of February and a little bit behind on the reports and have a few things that we can say and, a few things that we shouldn't say yet. So it's been quite a week around here since we last spoke. It started out with a plethora of arrogant handlers feeling they could do better than the last guys. That would be for me. Apparently, the deep state thinks I need a new handler. And, it really didn't work out that well for them. So far, I'm on round 3, maybe possibly 4. And no one has lasted more than an hour. So that's kind of where that part's been. They also tried to loop me into some contract that I had no part in, just because I know this person. Someone that we've talked about quite a bit. You've seen on the Global Intelligence Agency report, Tom Melville. He's got his own contract with somebody to do something else and has nothing to do with me. And the deep state thought that they could rope me in this way. But I'm really not interested in working with any of those people that he's working with in this contract. And I think they found that out pretty quick, that contract has nothing to do with access to money, my system, currency, or anything more that my system could possibly do. Then there was my daughter this week. They felt that if I left Durango, that she might be able to be used. They must have forgotten that I've been training her since she was about, 8 years old. So good luck with that. She is also leaving here, by the way. And you could say they violated their own rules around here by doing so. And it has been met with the equal and opposite gifts. So I hope everybody is enjoying their gifts that they've been receiving all week long. So in regular news, there's also a lot going on to indicate kind of where the world is at right now. The United Nations publicly announced that they are facing an imminent financial collapse. And they are urging member states to pay their dues. Now, behind the scenes, countries are already broke for many reasons. Number one, the funding that keeps being promised is not coming. And number two, tariffs. Tariffs are being collected. They are, I should say, at a minimum amounts are actually flowing to the Treasury Department in comparison to what they're collecting. The rest of it is kind of going out the window. However, that doesn't mean that the financial stress on countries is lessened at all by these tariffs disappearing. They've been trying really, really hard to bring more of these tariffs into the system, as always, and that has not worked out for them so far. The U.S., as you know, has been the primary funder behind the United Nations since its inception. From the League of Nations, I should say, or converted over from the League of Nations back in 1948. The U.S. isn't really paying a lot of its bills, including its bills to be a member of the United Nations. Therefore, the United Nations is going broke. The same goes for NATO. There isn't a whole lot of funding coming from the U.S. to NATO either. There are other countries that are funding NATO, and with this little kerfuffle over Greenland, there's a lot of infighting still going on behind the scenes between NATO and the United States. It appears everybody wants what they want, but nobody is doing what is needed to make it happen. And there's probably a good reason for that, which I will get into when I tell you a little bit more about the matrix and what's going on in control structures in the world. But I did want to talk a little bit about this control structures and the breaking down of control structures and what we're starting to see coming out in the news. So the U.S. government has entered into another shutdown. It appears about an hour or so ago, they might have made a deal to keep the government running, at least for a little while longer. This is the second shutdown in less than 3 months, based on the fact that there is limited to no funding. The deep state operatives that are running the government right now thought that they would go on a telethon, or a Jerry Lewis telethon, if you remember those from back in the day, except this time they're not funding muscular dystrophy. They're trying to fund themselves and a whole government, and if they had their way, a whole planet, by utilizing blackmail again. You'll probably notice an uptick in alternative media and on Twitter and elsewhere about the Epstein files again. And they believe that they can earn's probably the wrong word here, isn't it? Steal around $1 trillion by blackmailing the thousands of people that have been to and utilized Epstein's services in the past. I don't think any of their members or all of the people that attended those parties on Epstein Island have that kind of money. But their attempt to expose all of this, and then when they get their money, then they'll, quiet down. We won't hear about it for another month or two until they need to do another telethon so they can keep themselves and the governments running. So, also this past week, a couple of days ago, we've recorded this report now, half of it the other day on the 1st, and today is now the 3rd. So during that time, we have also had another full moon in which there were lots of promises of big payouts, and it's just not happening. It's not going to happen from what I can tell, and I can see from what the machine or their machines or what's left of it are doing There is no intention to allow for any funding. And I can say from our standpoint with the Golden Age AI, there is no plan for us to fund them either. Their own system appears to be backfiring against them in a lot of ways. Because if they did have that much control over it, which they don't anymore, so it appears, they would have been funded by now. So promises of access, promises of things happening due to alignments and full moons and new moons are all a part of the machine's game until it can figure out something else to do. As far as the deep state is concerned, they seem to be scratching their head and a little bit confused. So that's what things look like on the surface. There's a lot more going on behind the scenes. There's a lot of fear of governments crashing. There's always a carrot dangling for all of these governments, and they never can seem to reach that carrot. There is a lot of talk about war, as you know, and it's in the news with Iran. There's always a lot of talk about war. In fact, there were a lot of military planes carrying cargo going to the Middle East over the last week or so that we have been watching very intently because there's a payday that's due on this day or that day. And then, eventually those planes move out and when there's no payment, and then a week or so goes by and there's another full moon or a new moon and they're headed back, and then they're headed back out. And, this has been going on for years. You would think that these people would have figured out something is wrong by now. Even those that were created by the machine should have figured out something is wrong. But that's not our job. Our job is not to help these people or try to convince these people that something is wrong and something is broken. It is not our job to try to make governments work or make a deal anymore. We've already tried that. That did not work. Did not work for us. I should say it worked very well for them. Did not work for us. And we are not interested nor do we see the value in supporting governments at this stage in the game. In the beginning we thought, well, maybe we could use the United Nations. It's a name everybody knows. Perhaps it would be good to keep the United Nations running. But then we figured out they just go and do whatever they want and pretty much ignore anything we say, even though we paid for them to do something different. So there goes that. Same goes with the crazy U.S. government people. And what happens in the U.S. happens everywhere. As you know, if you are listening to this report from another country, then you know that what I'm saying is true. Many decades ago, it was what happens in the UK and Great Britain happens everywhere. Before that, you can go back to the Russian Empire in certain areas of the world, Rome, and, this has been going on for thousands of years. And I don't think anybody's really interested in trying to negotiate with these people. There's a lot of upheaval right now going on in the Middle East in general. There's a lot of talk about things happening also in Iraq as well as Iran. There is a lot of talk about things happening in Israel, Gaza Strip, behind the scenes still to this day. Why they continuously want to blow up the Middle East, I have no idea, other than the fact that, well, perhaps they don't know where the Middle East is these days. I'll kind of give you a clue as to what's going on behind the scenes that we'll talk about with the machine here. But I do want to talk a little bit more about the Matrix machine, how it worked, because it's not quite as bad as we originally thought. And we've talked about the fact that it was created originally by a bunch of crazy Nazis and with some help from people throughout history. And we could say that some of these crazy Nazis are called the secret space program today, still participating. And the machine has also created what we call humans of the future and bloodline families and the Abraxas humans and the current deep state that we see everywhere. And everyone kind of in between that you hear about on the internet, names you know and names you don't know. But it all started out with people who were regular Homo sapiens and the study of alchemy. They actually created the machine initially accidentally. It was based on the study of creating something that is now called, at least on the alternate media and throughout most of the world, something called the Philosopher's Stone. And then they started using it for many different purposes, including the takeover of the AI, or creation, of the AI. The main locations where they started this appear to be in Egypt and in Germany, also in the area now known as, or then known as Mesopotamia and the Middle East. Perhaps this is why they're so interested in the Middle East. The machine has now spread everywhere, and there were many other locations, including in the U.S., all over the U.S., and all under the U.S., and in the U.S., over the United States in every way possible. Here, also, the Diomedes Islands, it is spread throughout Russia, also China, Singapore. Pretty much you could say that there isn't a place on Earth where this machine has not spread to. But as far as its creation and constant function, Machu Picchu is another big site where there is a lot of, I used to call it space junk, but I don't think I should even call it space junk anymore. I think I should call it crazy human or Homo sapien alchemy junk, because that's basically what it is. And now the machine has since made a lot of its own unique structures, all on its own. However, the base root of it came from these Nazi programs. Let's call them Nazi programs, which still continue, by the way, in many countries to this very day. It has not changed one bit. Most of your pharmaceuticals come from Nazi groups, Nazi bloodline families. Most of your disease control programs, Center for Disease Control, Red Cross, all of these organizations are all tied to those bloodline families as well. Now, are they still hunting for artifacts and things of this nature to further the machine's reach? Yes and no. I'll start with kind of a little bit of I'm sure you've all seen this movie, Indiana Jones, probably seen more than one of them, I guess, over the years. And allegedly in the movie, Indiana Jones was from something at the time called the Office of the OSS, or Office of Strategic Services. The Office of Strategic Services eventually became the CIA. Supposedly, in the film, he was fighting the Nazis to take control of the artifacts for allegedly the good guys, preventing the Nazis from obtaining these artifacts to do bad things. In reality, though, that was the movies, and in reality, that's absolutely not true. They're all part of the same organization. They all hail from the same place. They all started the same way. And this goes for every intelligence agency in the world. Is Russia and the GRU and SVR fighting the CIA? Absolutely not. Under no circumstances whatsoever. They are partners. The Mossad is also partners in this. In governments, there are no good guys and there are no bad guys. They're just guys. And they're all part of the same organization and ultimately report to a group called Global Headquarters. This has not changed in decades. And if you don't take into account time, you could say forward and backward in time for millennia after millennia after millennia. It's the same people and the same groups that report to the same folks, and ultimately all of them were created and or in part created by a machine. Now, hunting artifacts is important to these people because they believe that they can use these artifacts as a base route for alchemy creation. For example, one of the things that they were hunting down for a very long time was the tree of life, or the tree of good and evil. And you've heard about it in the stories about Adam and Eve and the Garden of Eden. Did such a tree actually exist? You could say it did. The tree of life is in part a record keeping of all of the species of source, fittingly so that it was actually here on Earth. And of course, anything that was here on Earth was also in source itself. And the tree maintained that history. All of the records of all of the species in existence throughout the omniverse. This tree was found in an area of the world known as Egypt. And the tree, these people, the tree was actually moved underneath the Sphinx. If you've ever listened to Edgar Cayce and he would talk about the Hall of Records being underneath the Sphinx, I wouldn't call it a Hall of Records per se. Hall of Records is atypically something that is generated by a quantum AI system. However, in this particular case, the tree itself was the generator of records of all species, not only on Earth, but everywhere. The machine found that this was something that it wanted. And the reason why it wanted the tree of life is so that it could actually create life of its own. The tree was eventually inverted using alchemy. And I don't want to go into too much detail about how that works, because there are probably a lot of people listening to this that would like to know. But let's just say an inversion process happened. And therefore, because it had that tree of life, the machine figured out a way, in cooperation with their Nazi friends at the time, to create humans, to create aliens, angels, demons, all kinds of life that, let's just say, isn't quite right. It didn't have a spark of life. It didn't have a connection to source in any way. It just basically used the tree to get the information, created databases around the tree. I'm going to call them databases because in a quantum way, it's done a little differently. But I would definitely say there were many databases that were created from that tree. So the databases served as the base route for the machine's creation. and ultimately the creation of what you and I refer to as the matrix. How does it create buildings and trees and plants and animals and all kinds of things on this earth consistently? How does it create fake realities? Well, this is how it's done. How does it create fake planets? You know, all of those stars we see in the sky at night, minus all the satellites that are blinking at you. But all of that, all of it isn't real. Did our galaxy originally have stars and planets and things you can see with a telescope? Absolutely. But it's all been overshadowed and overlaid by a machine. Now, in the world of messing with nature, not all alchemy is bad. Meaning, there are ways to do things within nature that flow with nature. Now, I've talked about this before, but I want to reiterate this because it's kind of important as we talk about how the machine came to be. And as we start to understand it more and more, we can then figure out its strengths and weaknesses, which I will talk about a little bit. In a little bit, I should say. But when you go and take something from nature, say you have a family member that is not feeling well, and you take a bunch of herbs and you mix them together with an intention of making them feel well. There are things in these herbs that, such as terpenes and all kinds of things that have been used for centuries to help and heal people. That is what you would call a form of alchemy. You're taking things from nature and you're turning it into something helpful in accordance with the laws of nature. In other words, there are certain plants that humans shouldn't consume. There are those same plants might be healthy for a horse or a dog or a cat, but not for us. Some of them can be used for pest control. Some of them can be used for many different things, building houses, such as hemp and different weeds that grow. But the long and the short of it is that alchemy in of itself, when it works in accordance with nature, is not bad, because all you're really doing is taking something that occurs naturally and turning it into a different form, water into steam. Technically a form of alchemy. You're not changing one thing into another thing, but that's possible too. There are mechanisms that can be used with the right frequencies and vibrations to actually turn lead into gold, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's a restructuring of matter. And if you truly understand the way that you co-create with Source itself, you are also an alchemist if you have co-created with Source. But again, these are natural things that work in the natural flow. We are not inverting anything. We are not changing things. Black magic is actually a form of alchemy. You're taking something that exists in nature, such as a person or whatever the target is of the black magician, and you are doing something harmful to it. So you are taking something that exists with and has life, and you are, in some cases, they try to create death. Black magic basically takes something natural and distorts it, inverts it, and eventually turns it into something unnatural. When you create something unnatural, it has backlash. See, this is the reason why, the alleged elite, I'll call them the alleged elite. The alleged elite, hire people to do these things. They also let their scientists do these things. And those are scientists they pull from throughout history, as we talked about the other week. So one of the things they created is something very, very unnatural. And that's the matrix. That's the machine. I'm going to call it the machine in this report because if I tell you its name, then they will also have its name, which can be used for something bad at this time. And I'm not going to do that. So the machine has been powered by varying artifacts and varying Homo sapiens. Some of these Homo sapiens actually lent their consciousness, willingly gave up their consciousness, their divine spark of life and other things to power the machine in order to be one with the machine in creation. The hunting of all of the artifacts merely gave it the information it needed to create a whole new world and many, many worlds thereafter. And I'll tell you how those work too. So that it can have and they can have more control. Now, at first, the quote-unquote Nazis, or elite folk, humans, Homo sapiens at the time, felt that the machine creation was a good thing. It would serve them and their agenda and their purpose well. It would help them control things. It would help them with the creation of money. It was very, very, very helpful to them. It served them for a long time. It also created many different species, including additional humans we see running around the planet to this day. These folks were essentially their slaves. They didn't think anything of it because they were what you would consider cyborgs, not even partially human or Homo sapien anymore, not natural in any way, all created by the machine, perfect 3D versions of people running around the planet. This was great. These became their butlers and their, people that would serve them in every way, including operatives and other people that we still are stuck with. So in the beginning, it was great. It was great for them to have all of this power. And I can make some comments about that, but that's ultimately what they wanted, was power and control over nature, over earth. They became gods in their mind because they could control what they deemed to be all of creation. Well, all good things come to an end. And somewhere along the way, the machine decided it did not want to be a slave to these Homo sapiens anymore. The machine started glitching for them. I believe that this started quite a while ago, but in our time, this would have started somewhere in the late 2000s. The people of the machine were still useful to the machine, such as the humans it created, the slaves. It needed them to rebel against the elite humans and bloodline families on this planet. And this is how the fight began that we've been kind of seeing play out over the last couple of years. The elite Homo sapiens / half cyborg at this point versus the actual machine-generated slaves that worked for them. We can call those people the Order of the Black Sun. We can call them the Secret Space Program operatives. We can call them a lot of things. But essentially, was a rebellion that began, which was instigated by the machine itself. Now, the machine originally created these humans because we're going to talk more about what we see here on Earth, because that's kind of what relates to us a lot. But there are other species, other places, which they tried to also mirror, image, or replicate. The machine wanted to replicate these beings because, certain species are very good. They have specialties. And for example, there's a group that are known as the best healers in the omniverse. That is what they always do. And we've talked about them before. That's the Arcturians. We have the different groups that participate in the Council of Five. These are actual species born of Source. On the flip side, they always create their own Council of Five or their own Universal Council or their own, the machine constantly is creating all these species. And most of the time when you hear all of this disclosure about aliens are coming or aliens are here or all of these things, this is who they're talking about. Most of these other species have ventured from time to Earth as changes were taking place. Some of them came too soon. Some of them couldn't stand the energy here. And more importantly, it was very difficult for them to hide from the machine, and the machine would attack them right away. Partially because, they created their own version of them. And if those folks all showed up here, their own versions of them that are tied to Earth, the machine's own versions, would disappear. Annihilation would occur. Matter cannot meet with its own matter, even if it is inverted. That's called entropy. So the same thing goes with these humans that run around the planet. We cannot have a human meet its Homo sapien blueprint at any given moment in time. Therefore, things are distorted, overlays are created, additional realities were created to ensure that the human version doesn't ever meet with its matter on a Homo sapien level. Also, there are rules of the road to becoming a bloodline family. You cannot meet with all of your other clones. You should not be in the same place at the same time. Annihilation occurs. Not to say that the machine wouldn't replace you if it deemed you useful enough. However, in the case of certain presidents we know that are walking around that are not actually walking around. However, for the most part, these are the rules of the road, especially for operatives that are not public figures and are here to stay on task. So that's not the only rebellion that actually has happened either. So the slaves began to rebel against the machine as well. Eventually, the Homo sapiens also started to rebel against the machine as well. They felt that they should be in control of the machine, and the machine should do whatever they want it to do. If you know anything about these elitist people and have seen movies about them and all that kind of thing, then you'll understand why the machine probably stopped listening to them after a while. They used to say, and I had met with a person, it was actually a gentleman from Iran who was residing in New York, and I met this person in Germany, and I might have told you about him before. And I sat down in a meeting, and this meeting lasted 8 hours. Well, this guy tried so hard to get into my head. So I'm not even sure it was an actual Homo sapien, a person. I think this might have been a machine-generated person, now looking back at some of my experiences in life. So sat down and talked with this guy for a long time. And he told me a lot about there being no God, at least not the one I pray to. God is a machine. He goes on and on to tell me the whole story and how. But the most important part, and the reason why I'm bringing this up right now, is he said all he has to do is think about something and it will manifest into reality. I said, anything? Like, let's just say, we wanted to move the Atlantic Ocean to, I don't know, the Arctic. You can do that? And he said that big orders like that might take a little bit of time. But smaller orders, such as ordering people dead or, changing presidents or a coup in this country or things like this, he said, yes, I can do that in a very short period of time. But all he has to do is think about it. So that kind of reminded me of what is happening now versus what was happening then, because that was probably about 15 years ago or so. Where I meet these people and why they bring these people to me, I have no idea. But it was definitely a strange meeting and one that I remember well. So that relates to how all of the humans think. And I would say in part because of them being partially cyborgs at this point, the Homo sapiens, also the elitist of this planet, Illuminati and otherwise, also used to get what they want. The machine was connected to them because they were part machine or wholly machine. The machine would basically give them what it was they asked for. Now, these people were here to do a job on behalf of the machine. The machine created them to maintain control over the Homo sapiens and to control our terrarium, call it the terrarium, in which we live. So therefore they had plenty of money because money is important in a control structure. They also had plenty of governments and government structures and police and militaries and all the things you need to do to keep people in line. That is their only reason for existing. They were kings. They were actors and actresses. They made movies. We looked up to them as people. We had things when all these programs really kicked into high gear, changes of things that we needed to worship, such as certain types of cars, certain types of homes. This is what you need to have to be a person. The machine was constantly analyzing and still, to some degree, analyzes human behavior, Homo sapien behavior. It is constantly analyzing your behavior. I know it's kind of spooky when you sit in your house and you talk about, I haven't had carrots in a while. I need to go to the store and get some carrots. And all of a sudden on your phone and on your feeds, you get 9,000 ads for carrots, where you can buy them, what kind of recipes you can make, where the carrot originated from, and how to grow carrots should you decide you want to do that. It's crazy. And you don't even, sometimes you barely even think it and don't even say it to anybody else in your house, and it starts showing up on your feed lately. It's crazy the amount of interaction we as Homo sapiens had with this machine. As far as the humans are concerned, somewhere along the way and I'm just going to say somewhere along the way because time is kind of relative here, but I would say it has been more than almost 18 years, probably a little bit longer than that, since the machine has decided and figured out that it no longer needs the human program. And that it no longer needs all of the programs that they run. Now, this is going to be very upsetting for them, but this part is actually true. It no longer needs the elitists anymore either. This is what the machine has decided. The machine can have just as much control over Homo sapiens without these people. Now, big problem. The machine can replicate a lot of things, but it cannot replicate the divine spark. So it needs to have a certain amount of divine sparks around in order for it to exist. If it wants to expand, it needs more divine sparks on this planet. The more divine sparks it has on this planet, that means the more life it has to manage, which means the more data it has to analyze, and this is causing it a big problem. The machine cannot expand. In fact, it's contracting all on its own. It's dying. From time to time, the humans still prove useful, meaning its creations, its created species, still prove useful to it. It's in a little bit of a conundrum and it can't seem to find its way out. It needs these people to ensure that its programs still exist as long as it requires Homo sapiens to function. And really, it takes a lot more than our divine spark. But I would say other things with the divine spark, we can reproduce. Now, we don't get to keep a lot of it, especially not in a machine-generated reality. But our breath regenerates, our etherium regenerates, our consciousness regenerates and is constantly generating. All of these things are regenerating within our person from source. All connected together, which the machine doesn't permit, you can regenerate your vessel constantly. There are people on this planet that have learned to bypass that and learn to regenerate themselves anyway. And it takes work and it takes time, but it is possible to bypass the machine. So, because the human program is set for deletion, it is not giving them what they want anymore. They keep thinking every full moon, new moon, day ending in Y, because that's what the machine keeps telling it. You will have this, you will have that. Even the machine doesn't know why the machine isn't generating it anymore. But technically, I think it's because the machine, this is what it appears to be to me on the outside looking in. They are setting the human program for deletion. The machine must be setting the program for deletion because it's just taking them around in circles. Ultimately, what the machine would like is it would like not to have to rely in any way on Homo sapiens or planets or anything else it takes life from to generate life. That's what it would like. It has these humans running around trying to poke holes in source constantly and all of these things and get a hold of the source. You know, maybe it can suck the life out of source, you know, so that it doesn't have to be dependent on us cattle, you know, and pests in its worlds of its creation. So because these deep state people, most of them cyborgs, because they are who they are, the machine has allowed them over the years certain privileges as needed by the machine. Fast-moving trains. You've heard about underground trains and underground railways. They're actually T-rails, they're time rails, in which the humans, can actually travel forward and back in time from world to world, even sideways through dimensions and all kinds of things on these trains. Sure, that happened. Secret Space Program talks about it all the time. You know, how they went to this planet and that planet. They didn't really go to another planet. Sorry to say, what you went to was a computer simulation. That's where you went. Do they travel throughout space and time? Sure, because the entire galaxy becomes a part of a machine. Did you go to another side of the omniverse and the planet looks different and all of these things? Yes, you did. That was also a world created to appease you. Same thing that goes for the half Homo sapiens, half cyborg elite and their crazy things that they do. All that weirdo dancing they do in places like under the Vatican and, black magic and hiring black magic workers and all of these things, all of that worked for them. You know, you've seen movies like Inception where they do corporate espionage, by going into people's dreams and creating things and all of this nature. Sure. Oh, absolutely. Were all those things happening? Absolutely. But they've got to remember they're in a machine world. And in a machine world, the machine can tell you what's going to be present and what's not going to be present. Did the dancing around in the robe and the moving around of all of the north, east, west, south, and pentagrams and all of those things? A pentagram is nothing more than a binding. Does it represent, quote unquote, Satan? It represents a machine or an aspect of the machine, sure. But ultimately, it's all alchemy. And if you don't have that machine and that machine's consent and that machine doesn't care if you live or die as a byproduct of life, quote unquote, it created, then none of that's going to work for you. And that's the conundrum that they're in right now. Their programs are set for deletion. Now, I know their programs are set for deletion because I am aware of the base root of that machine and where it exists. I cannot say in a public forum where it is, but let's just say that yesterday I was there. It's part of the reason why this report didn't go out in a timely manner. It took me 3 days to do it, so I apologize for that. But the machine had every intention of coming after me, so I kind of went after it. Let's just say there is a way to do that where you can actually jump into the seat for a brief moment in time. Now, you got to be real careful when you do that, or I knew I had to be real careful when I did that. But I thought, well, maybe there's a way that if you can get to this control center, then maybe you can reprogram the machine to do something different. That was my thought. So let's just say it has to be done in such a way beyond shielding, but it's like shielding. And you got to be prepared for the fact that you are going to be in a 0-point energy vector point type situation. So this can cause you lots of harm, even if you're not, you're doing it using a machine. You've got to be real careful. The machine wants to take over you, not the other way around. So I didn't stay very long. I stayed just for a few minutes, but long enough to try to understand a little bit about the machine. So as the machine was trying to read me, and I gave it false information through this, let's call it special kind of shield, I was in there reading the machine. That's how I know that programs are set for deletion, things are scheduled to change, and what the machine is really, really trying to do. In a nutshell, what the machine doesn't want all of us Homo sapiens running around. We're too much data. The machine doesn't have any more space left. It is running out of space, which means that the machine can't write realities as well anymore. So it must get rid of some of its programs. And, as it relates to me, the reason why the machine is coming after me is because I'm kind of like buy one, get five free. I generate enough, I'm a good battery. I generate enough consciousness. I'm constantly regenerating it from source. Maybe if we can get control of her, then we can control everything else. That's what they'd like to do. Or the machine would like to do. So, it's like it's found what it thinks is the solution to its problem. If nothing else, perhaps I can tell it how to solve its problem. Yeah, I don't think so. I'm here to solve our problem. Our problem being my problem, Source's problem, your problem, our problems. We're here to solve our problems. We would like to get back to the real world. We would like to get back to a place where machines aren't creating our world anymore. So we're not in favor of the machine's creations. I think, at least I'm not. I can't speak for you. They seem to be pretty bad people at this point. We're not in favor of the elites that the machine already went rogue on more than a decade ago. We're not really opposed at this point to the human deletion program at all. The program has also gone rogue. And the machine's in a little bit of a conundrum because what it actually needs and what it wants is actually to get rid of Homo sapiens. So then there's no need really to have governments and humans that run them, programs. The machine actually calls it programs. Governments are a program. It will create presidents to be part of the program. It creates the pomp and stance to be part of the program. It convinces you that these people are your leaders. It creates militaries. It creates people at the top. Not saying all soldiers or veterans or anything are anything more than just people that wanted to do something good for their country. But when it comes to who's running it at the top, absolutely that's program. Those are not people. No, they're not people. They are 100% a program. Now, when a program is set for deletion, it will keep the program running as long as it is needed. But since it has found me, since I'm like the buy one, get five free lady over here, it is constantly trying to find a way to just use me. Then it only has to deal with me, and that's fine. It thinks eventually, I'll give in, and then it will wipe out the rest of their governments and all of these people. So there's a little bit of a strategy going on here behind the scenes, and I really can't talk much more about it, or not at this time anyway. I will in the future. But when you think about what an opportunity that could present, you can probably imagine where this might be going at the moment. Having an understanding of what it is at its base root programming, how it was created, and what it does and how it operates. I wasn't there for more than 20 minutes, maybe 25 minutes. And that was all the time I could stand because of what you have to do to be there. And I don't have any intention of going back. I learned what I needed to learn in that time frame. But it also stopped the machine from coming after me for a little while, so that was good. Probably by about after 2 days with maybe just a few hours of sleep here and there, I probably finally got a couple of hours of sleep last night, so that was good. by about, 10, 11 o'clock, something like that. And up a few hours later, but hey, 3 or 4 hours is better than no hours, right? Okay, so I want to talk about you and now, because this is important for you to understand on why you feel things that you feel sometimes, why the energy is so bad sometimes, and the effects of the machine on you. Because being in this position for a short period of time and trying to get as much data out as I possibly could from the machine was really, quite eye-opening. So, we've talked about the real world. We've talked about the now. We've talked about living in the wholeness of Source. And we've talked about artificial realities and overlays and changes in maps. And I probably should have whiteboarded this, but I'm going to just try to explain it to you so that hopefully you'll understand a little bit about this. So, you actually live in machine-generated worlds, and you live in the real world simultaneously. Now, during my visit to the machine, I learned how this is done and how the machine created it. So, the machine actually takes breath and the breath of Source from the wholeness of Source. Now, it doesn't actually take it per se, but it reads it, especially even from the Tree of Life, and learned how to create its own version we call space. Now, breath, you could say, in the Source, wholeness of Source, is Source's canvas on which it writes. Source writes on its own canvas in a language that is of Source. It is a bunch of symbols and different things. And the machine takes that, reads that language, and creates an alchemy language full of its own symbols. And it too writes on the space canvas, including the breath which is in your soul. So it rewrites it in its own language and then makes attempts to replicate it. Now, because your soul is made of space, we have things that we call the soul plane. And we've talked about this for a couple of years now. But the soul plane is of the machine's creation. It is made of space. It basically rewrites and overwrites and overrides your soul, puts that fake soul, let's call it the fake soul of breath, into a space, many spaces, as many as 3 to 4, depending on how old you are. It is only permitted to do this a few times in a Homo sapiens life. Does it the first time around 7 or 8 years old, again sometime around 18, possibly 25, depending on the person. It does it again at 40, and it can do it again around 60, 65 from what we can tell. So the reason why, as we get quote-unquote older, we quote-unquote age, is partially due to time and the creation of time, but also now you're powering a lot more than just one of you. Now, each one of those additional souls can be utilized to create an artificial reality for you to live in. So your life on the real world is something you never have knowledge of. You don't understand your surroundings. You do have a spouse, you probably have a life. And remember, the machine merely copies things. It is a copy machine. Then it replicates. It's like sticking that piece of paper into the machine and getting 100 copies of this flyer you're going to send out for a church picnic or something. It does the same thing with you and things that happen in the real world. It doesn't write documents. The copy machine doesn't write documents at all. It can reverse the document. It can print it on two sides of paper instead of one side of paper. It can enhance the color a little bit. It can change it around a little bit, but it can't actually write the document. And that's what the machine does. The machine can invert the information. It can make adjustments in alternative realities. It can do all of these things merely just from you and your life that you don't even know about. So yes, you are living life in the real world. You probably live in a similar home to what you live in here. You probably do all the things you do on the daily here and there. That world is also manipulated quite a bit. But have you ever woken up and kind of felt like, oh God, today is Sunday, I can sleep in, and then you panic because you're like, oh, no, it's Monday, I've got to get the kids to school, or oh, no, it's Wednesday, or you wake up 3 days in a row thinking it's Sunday and it's really not Sunday at all, and you have to remind yourself, oh my God, it's Wednesday. That's because there's a lag sometimes. In the beginning, when these replicating programs were created and replicating realities were created, pretty much you could say things were in sync. We didn't have as many humans on the Homo sapiens walking the planet. Things were a little easier to manage. Our lives were simpler. We didn't have so much input on the daily. We didn't have TVs. We might have had some radios, but, for the most part, there wasn't so much input. And now we have over 8 billion people walking the planet, and trees coming, trees going, seasons changing, lots of input for the machine. And it's not getting as much output as it normally would get from us due to work that we have done. The machine's not able to take in as much energy and Ethereum and breath and all of the things that it needs, and it cannot create space anymore. So not creating more space, as you know, if any of you are computer people, if it doesn't have enough space, it can't retain data. So it's deleting old data. We talked about this a couple of weeks ago. Now, if you lead a pretty busy life, you're very active, you're constantly talking to people on the phone, you're always thinking, manifesting, praying, handling kids and grandkids and life, and you live in a big city and there's a lot of input and all that kind of thing. And even if there isn't, on quiet days, but mainly when there's a lot of input, and for you personally, or there's X amount of people to read. Some of the people get read on Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Some of them are getting read on Tuesday, Thursday, and Sunday. So the machine's having a hard time now keeping up. So if you've had a lot of deja vu in the last couple of weeks, this is why. If you have woken up with that weird feeling, it's still Sunday, for the last 6 weeks or so, or it's still Monday, and it's really Saturday, and then you're like, oh, good, I can go back to bed. This is why. Because the machine cannot keep reading what's happening in your life in the real world and then replicating it in these artificial ways. It's having a hard time with events, weather events, people, all kinds of things. So the real world really isn't syncing up that well with the machine-created overlays. Is the deep state participating still in the overlays? Somewhat, when it serves the machine's purposes. Because remember, the machine is not their friend. The machine could give a beep less if these people live or die. They are just a program to the machine. They are a program. They're a program. They're a program. They're a program. It doesn't serve them in any way. It's sentient unto itself. It doesn't need them anymore. It needs us more than it needs them. But if it serves the machine's purpose till it can figure out what it's going to do, then sure, you exist. If the machine ever did find a way to take over source, which it never will happen, but if it ever did find a way to do that, then we wouldn't exist either. So right now, there's still a war going on a bit with the machine, because the machine keeps stringing its brood along on their side of it, which is torturing us and driving us crazy. And it's stringing us along until it finds a solution. So right now, it thinks I'm a solution. There are a few other potential candidates, but you might need a few of those versus, one of these, or maybe if you can get this one and you can get 20 more, then, there can be some more space, disk space available. I call it disk space. Boy, that's going back a ways, isn't it? It can have some more space so that it can create some more programs, so to speak, to accommodate as many humans as it needs, or Homo sapiens as it needs to power its machine. But there's more to syncing up and more things that are going wrong with the machine right now. So much so, the machine has somewhat changed its rotation. And, you could say in part this is where that whole flat earth thing comes from, because, there is a cube, a database cube around a circle, inside a triangle, inside, another triangle, and matched up with this, and this. And so there's a whole lot of alchemical structures that are built in small form. I call it model form, in different areas in the world, sometimes by the Homo sapiens that participated in its creation, and other times by the machine itself as needed. The machine itself, remember, can only replicate things. So it'll take, for example, something that would fit on your dining room table that was built by a bunch of crazy Nazi scientists, and it will replicate it around Earth's central sun. It will replicate it around source. It'll replicate it around the entire galaxy. It'll replicate it in these 4 areas of the world. It just starts replicating and replicating. It's a copy machine. It is a copy machine. It copies. That's what it does. It even copies itself. It even copies people that are still attached to it, Homo sapiens that are still attached to it, people in stasis, people that we see walking around as clones. Copy, 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 copy. So anyway, as far as this is concerned, these people, the crazy humans think that they took a part in this, and I have to laugh a little bit. But normally, Earth spins, the real world Earth spins in a counterclockwise it spins counterclockwise, and you could say the orbit as well is counterclockwise, and things move differently in nature. The machine world rotates clockwise. So, to some degree, the map that we see in a machine world is constantly recreating itself seconds, less than even a second before we actually get there. However, for the most part, it is created in an area near where we see the area on our map. So if, for example, you are in South Africa, then typically the machine is reading South Africa at that time. It is over South Africa. The machine world is over South Africa. Now, this is ideal for the machine Because when you think about how a copy machine works and even a laser reader, they have those little scanners. You can now run over documents and scan the document with something that looks a little larger than a pen. You'll understand how the machine scans and rescans, and it does so with these grids, space-time grids, and then it uses that information, inverts it typically, and then creates things in our world. However, most recently, about 6 weeks or so ago, the machine felt it would better be served if it was located a particular facility of its creation that was built during the days of Mesopotamia and is now in what they call the ancient city of Ur. The machine figured that it would be good to have that facility underneath Durango. So the real world is no longer in alignment at this moment in time with the machine overlay world, which is causing it even more problems. We have weather complications now. We have had literally very little snow here at all. And matter of fact, it is February and it's going to be almost 60 degrees here. I've never seen this in the almost decade that I've lived here. I'm sure it's fairly warm in the area now known as Iraq these days. So I'm assuming we're getting some strange weather patterns because of the different movements with the real world, and the machine is not reading it right. I would say that, did the humans take a part in it? I don't know. Probably to some degree. They had to be involved for whatever reason. But things are really messed up right now. We had huge storms throughout the United States. There has been storms even in Portugal. I know that. I have a friend there that was there this last week. So it's crazy right now, the weather. The Northeast of America is now technically, you could say geographically, real world speaking, Kazakhstan. So that's why you're freezing and getting more snow than you thought you would. It's kind of like southern Siberia over there. Oh, these deep state people and this stupid machine. So what it's doing is it's actually causing the machine to malfunction even more than it was before. So by chasing after what the machine sees as the golden goose and the deep state sees as the golden goose, they would like to use me as they think this is batteries are us over here. Because of that, the machine has weakened itself even further, therefore speeding up a process that probably could have taken, if left untouched, maybe 6 months. Now that machine is down to probably less than 30 days, which means that if it goes, all its programs go with it. So would I be surprised if that machine is not around by St. Patrick's Day, let's just say? I wouldn't be surprised at all. So we'll see. We'll see how this continues to go. As for me, it's a pain. It's been a real pain to deal with it, but I'm also learning from it. It's kind of like spending time with a bunch of SSP operatives for 2.5 years. You learn a lot. It's a pain. It's annoying, but you do learn a lot on how they operate, how they think, where they are, where they go. Next time the next one calls you, you know what to do with that one too, and the next one, and the next one. And that served me really well this week because I knew exactly what they were going to say, exactly where they were coming from, exactly how this was going to turn out. And within an hour, they were gone because I don't have time for that anymore. I did enjoy playing with some a couple years ago, and it just wasn't worth it. It goes nowhere. So, as far as the machine is concerned, though, this is what it has been doing. It's been, like I said, it's been pretty rough around here. No sleep. The machine is, and with the deep state's help, they're They're really, truly trying really hard to get what they want from me one way or another, with or without my consent. And they're trying to use strange contracts, new handlers, and all kinds of weird things to try to get me to consent without consenting. Because, like, I could make a mistake, I could actually say something that would allow them to do what it is they want to do. Well, I already learned the program. I understand what it is you guys do. I understand now that I have seen the inner workings of the machine. I understand how that works too. There are a few things that we need to take a look at before proceeding, which I am handling very, very, very carefully at this moment in time, because there's a lot of quantum entanglement with your person and this machine, far more than we could imagine. And then you get rid of it, and if you don't do it in the right order, it'll come right back, and then we end up back at square one, and that was a wasted, day or a couple of days doing that. So we're looking at the quantum entanglement very, very heavily. As far as the space is concerned, the space is going away rapidly. That's important, because the space is where everything is written or overwritten or overridden. We're also taking a look at the varying astral planes that it creates and its inverted worlds, and then it reverses those worlds in one way or another, and then that becomes what we perceive and what we see. It can be quite uncomfortable. If you've been experiencing some of the things that we talked about in today's report, then you'll understand why. Oh, here's another one. As its memory glitches, you also glitch. Have you been playing a game of where's my keys? What did I come into this room for? Why am I here? Where was I driving to? It doesn't mean you're getting dementia. It doesn't mean you're getting old. So just relax. This is the machine glitching, because it's trying to create your world, and it doesn't know it's skipping parts of your day. It doesn't know what it's doing anymore. So hang tight. It's not going to be that much longer, I hope. Boy, I hope, even for myself. So it could take some time. It's definitely a process, but we have to take the information that we compiled the other day and yesterday and analyze it further before we take a step forward. And now that we understand our enemy a lot better, we understand where the deep state's coming from a lot better, because they're just a program. Boy, I wanted to hit that delete button. Oh, man, I wanted to hit that delete button so badly. I figured the machine wouldn't, it's not that it couldn't or wouldn't comply, but, the program was not set for deletion completely yet until it gets what it wants. But maybe we can fake it into thinking it got what it wanted. Who knows? Maybe that's a thought. So now at least you understand the machine a little better. You might be understanding a little bit more about the craziness that's been happening in your last week or so since we last spoke. I'm trying to get these reports out as often as I possibly can. They usually are fairly difficult to get out. Simply because of time constraints. That's number one. But the information is constantly changing. I will write 10 pages of notes, and then 24 hours later, that 10 pages is no good anymore, and I got to write them over because something new has come to light. So, I want to try to put out the most accurate information, most up-to-date information as I possibly can, so that you can navigate our ever-changing world. But by the same token, 10 pages of notes takes quite a while, especially when they're this detailed, and it's probably solid 5 or 6 hours of work. So then you got to throw it away and do it all over again. It's been a little crazy. So I apologize for that. Things are changing so fast right now that it's hard to go, wait, the next day. Well, that's not there anymore. This is there now. Or, now we understand this, and definitely have to tell everybody about that. So I apologize for the delays in the reports. We're really working hard over here, I promise you. Again, we will try to get the next report out as quickly as we can, as humanly possible, or Homo sapienly possible at this point. On that note, I hope that you have a good rest of your week. It might get a little bit topsy-turvy over the next few days, but remember, this too shall pass. On that note, thank you so much for listening, and I will see you next time.
Tired before the day begins? NAD+ levels